Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're stepping into a story that begins with muddy streets, borrowed towels on the floor, and a son asking to stay just for a few weeks after the flood. This is Narratives of Aunt Maris, where Black women's stories in America are told honestly with every open door, signed paper, and late night prayer still attached. Picture this: the lower part of town is under 3 feet of dirty water. Neighbors are sleeping on air mattresses in school gyms. And you do what any mother would do. You move your things into the little guest room so your son, his pregnant wife, and their designer suitcases can have the master bedroom. Weeks later, you pull into your own driveway and see strangers loading your grandmother's dining set into a truck, while your daughter-in-law looks you in the eye and says she'd rather sleep in the mud than share a roof with a cheap old woman. That's the moment you pick up your purse, walk out of the house you bought, and quietly decide it's time to call the lawyer you haven't spoken to in 15 years. And here's the hard reality check if you ever find yourself in a moment like that. You might not walk away with your sanity or your heart still intact. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And while you're here, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far these stories travel, from big cities to small towns, from night shift breaks to quiet bedrooms where you're finally alone with your thoughts. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a little soft background noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. After the flood, I temporarily gave my house to my son and daughter-in-law. When I visited, she stared at me and said, "Pack your things and get out. I'd rather sleep in the mud than share a roof with a cheap old woman like you." I walked out in silence. But the next morning, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought the house I'd called home for 23 years would become the place where my own son would watch his wife destroy me. The flood had been devastating. 3 feet of murky water had surged through the lower part of town, turning neighbor against neighbor as everyone scrambled for temporary shelter. When Darius called me that Tuesday morning, his voice tight with panic, I didn't hesitate. "Mom, our apartment is completely flooded. Tasha's pregnant and we have nowhere to go. Could we maybe stay with you for a few weeks?" Of course, I said yes. What mother wouldn't I spend that entire day moving my things from the master bedroom to the small guest room, making space for them. I bought new linens, stocked the refrigerator with Tasha's favorite organic foods, and even picked up prenatal vitamins from the pharmacy. They arrived on Wednesday evening, Tasha dramatically clutching her barely visible belly while Darius carried their designer luggage. I'd prepared a welcome dinner, but Tasha took one look at my pot roast and wrinkled her nose. "I can't eat that. The smell makes me nauseous," she announced, settling onto my sofa like she owned it. "Darius, order me something from that vegan place downtown." I bit my tongue. Pregnancy was hard. I remembered. I'd been understanding for 3 weeks as she complained about everything from the water pressure in my shower to the thread count of my sheets. When she started rearranging my furniture without asking, I told myself she was just nesting. When she threw away my coffee maker because she only drank some expensive brand, I bought her machine and said nothing. But today was different. I'd driven across town to visit my friend Regina, and when I returned around 4 hours in the afternoon,
I noticed strange men loading my grandmother's antique dining set into a truck. My heart started racing as I pulled into the driveway. "Excuse me," I called out to one of the movers. "What are you doing with that furniture?" Lady inside said she was selling it, gave us the address and everything. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my house keys. Inside, I found Tasha directing two other men who were wrapping my mother's china in newspaper. "Tasha, what's going on?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh, you're back." "I'm decluttering. This old stuff was just taking up space, and we need room for the baby's things. That's my grandmother's dining set. You can't sell my furniture." Finally, she lifted her eyes to meet mine. And what I saw there made my blood run cold. Not embarrassment or apology, but pure contempt. "It's not really your furniture anymore. Is it Darius and I live here now? We're the ones paying the bills." She stood up, her 5-month belly barely showing beneath her designer maternity dress. Besides, who wants to eat off plates that old they probably have lead paint? "Darius," I called out, hoping my son would put an end to this madness. He appeared from the kitchen, a sandwich in his hand, looking uncomfortable, but not surprised. That's when I knew he knew what she was doing. "Mom, we talked about this. Tasha thinks we should modernize the place. You know, make it more suitable for raising a child. You talked about this, about selling my belongings without asking me." Tasha laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls I'd painted myself. "Asking you, Lydia, you're living in our house now. The sooner you accept that, the better this will be for everyone." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack. Like ice under pressure, still holding, but forever changed. This is my house. I bought it. I've lived here for over 20 years. "Was your house?" Tasha corrected, moving closer until I could smell her expensive perfume. "But Darius is the man of the family now, and I'm his wife. We make the decisions." The movers were still waiting, looking between us with growing discomfort. One of them cleared his throat. "Lady, do you want us to take this stuff or not? We've got other deliveries." Tasha smiled sweetly at them. "Yes, take it all. And there's more upstairs if you want to look." That's when something inside me shifted. I thought about the hours I'd spent polishing that dining table, the Christmas dinners we'd shared around it, the homework Darius had done sitting in those chairs. I thought about my mother's china, carefully preserved through 2 moves and a divorce. "Stop," I said quietly. The movers paused. Tasha's smile faltered. "Stop," I repeated louder this time. "You're not taking anything else." Tasha's face flushed red. "Darius, tell your mother to mind her own business." But I wasn't done. 23 years of memories in this house. 41 years of being Darius's mother. And this woman thought she could erase it all with a phone call to some moving company. "Get out," I said. Tasha blinked. "What? Get out of my house. Both of you. Now." Darius stepped forward, his face pale. "Mom, you don't mean that. We have nowhere else to go. You should have thought of that before you let your wife sell my belongings." Tasha's mask finally slipped completely. Her voice turned vicious, cruel in a way that made my skin crawl. "You can pack your things and disappear. I'd rather sleep in the mud than share a roof with a cheap, bitter old woman like you." The words hung in the air like poison. Darius opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at his wife, then at me, and I saw him make his choice. He said nothing, I nodded slowly, understanding finally settling over me like a heavy blanket. I walked to the front closet and pulled out my purse and coat. "The movers can finish loading whatever they want," I said calmly, "but don't touch anything in the master bedroom. Those are my personal belongings." I headed toward the door, then paused. Both Darius and Tasha were staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or uncertainty. "Oh, and Tasha," I turned back one last time. "Enjoy the house. I hope it brings you everything you deserve." As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of what they believed was now their home. Tasha had her arm possessively around Darius' waist, already triumphant. If only they knew what they just set in motion. I pulled into the parking lot of the Marriott downtown and sat in my car for a long moment, my hands still gripping the steering wheel. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card I hadn't looked at in 15 years. Calvin Price, attorney at law. I dialed the number with steady fingers. When his secretary answered, I said 3 words that would change everything. "It's time." Calvin. The hotel room felt strange after 23 years of sleeping in my own bed. The generic artwork on the walls, the scratchy comforter, the hum of the air conditioning unit. Everything reminded me that I was displaced, unwanted in my own home. But displacement, I'd learned long ago, could be temporary if you knew how to play your cards right. Calvin Price looked exactly the same as he had 15 years ago, just grayer around the temples. We met at his office the next morning, the mahogany desk between us covered with documents I hadn't seen since the day I'd signed them. "Lydia," he said, settling back in his leather chair. "I wondered when you'd call. How long has it been since Eunice passed 15 years next month?" I touched the locket at my throat where I kept Eunice's photo. Darius's grandmother had been more than a mother-in-law to me. She'd been my salvation when my marriage fell apart. I've honored her wishes all this time. Calvin. I've taken care of Darius like she asked. And now I told him everything. Tasha's cruelty. Darius' cowardice. The way they'd thrown me out of what they believed was my own home. Calvin listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "They have no idea about the trust?" he asked finally. "None whatsoever. Eunice made me promise never to tell Darius unless absolutely necessary. She wanted him to love me for who I was, not for what I might give him." Calvin nodded slowly. "And you believe that time has come?" I thought about Tasha's words. "I'd rather sleep in the mud than share a roof with a cheap, bitter old woman like you." I thought about Darius standing there silent, letting her destroy me. Yes, it has. After leaving Calvin's office, I drove slowly past my old house. Tasha's car was in the driveway along with a florist's van. Through the front window, I could see her directing workers as they set up elaborate flower arrangements in my living room. My phone buzzed, a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Green, Lydia. "That young woman is telling everyone you moved to a retirement home. Says she and Darius are the new owners." "Thought you should know." I smiled grimly and typed back, "Thank you for letting me know. Everything will be sorted out soon." Over the next few days, I watched from a distance as Tasha transformed my home into her vision of domestic perfection. She hired painters to cover my carefully chosen wall colors with trendy grays and whites. She had my garden torn up and replaced with modern landscaping that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Most telling of all, she was hosting parties. I sat in my rental car Wednesday evening, parked across the street, watching through the large front windows as Tasha entertained what looked like a dozen young couples. She moved through my living room like a queen, gesturing grandly at the renovations, clearly taking credit for the house's charm and character. Darius stood beside her, nodding and smiling, playing the role of proud homeowner. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting something to go wrong. Smart boy. He'd always had good instincts, even when he ignored them. My phone rang. Regina's number. Lydia. I just heard the strangest thing. Kathy Brooks was at some party at your house last night, and that daughter-in-law of yours was telling everyone that you signed the house over to them as an early inheritance. Said you realized you were too old to maintain it properly. I closed my eyes. What else did she say? That you're in some assisted living facility now. Much happier with people your own age. Lydia, you know I don't like to gossip, but something about this doesn't sit right with me. It shouldn't sit right because it's all lies. I could hear Regina's sharp intake of breath. I knew it. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. Thursday morning, I made my second call to Calvin. I want to move forward today. Are you certain? Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about Eunice's final words to me, whispered from her hospital bed as Darius held her other hand. Promise me you'll take care of him, Marlene. But promise me you'll also take care of yourself. This house, this trust. It's my way of making sure you both have what you need. But if he ever hurts you, if he ever forgets what family really means, you use whatever power you need to use, I'm certain. That afternoon, I received a call from my bank just as I'd expected. Mrs. Holloway. We need to speak with you about some unusual activity on the account linked to your property. Someone has been attempting to open a line of credit using the house as collateral. Someone a Mrs. Tasha Holloway. She claims to be the new owner. But our records show the property is held in trust with you as the sole beneficiary and trustee, I see. And what did you tell her? That we'd need documentation proving the transfer of ownership? She became quite agitated when we explained the requirements. I'll bet she did. Tasha had probably waltzed into that bank expecting them to hand her a check based on her word alone. Please put a fraud alert on the account and send me copies of any documents she attempted to submit. Of course, Mrs. Holloway. Friday evening, I drove past the house again. This time, I parked in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see Darius and Tasha arguing. She was gesticulating wildly, her face flushed with anger. Darius looked exhausted, defeated. He kept running his hands through his hair the way he'd done as a child when he was overwhelmed. I felt a pang of sympathy for my son. But sympathy wouldn't undo the damage he'd allowed to happen. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Tasha answered, and her face went white when she saw me. "What are you doing here? I've come to collect a few more of my personal belongings," I said calmly. "I hope that's not a problem." Darius appeared behind her, looking nervous. "Mom, you can't just show up like this." This is our home now, is it? I stepped past Tasha into my former living room. The space looked like a showroom now, all personality stripped away. How interesting. I had a call from the bank today. Tasha's face flushed red. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Something about attempting to use this house as collateral for a loan without proper documentation, of course. Darius frowned. Tasha, what is she talking about? Nothing. Your mother is just being dramatic. I smiled at her. The same pleasant smile I'd given her for months while she slowly took over my life. Oh, my dear, you have no idea how dramatic I can be. I walked to the mantelpiece where Eunice's portrait used to hang. In its place was some abstract art piece that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Tell me, Darius, do you remember your grandmother's last words to you? Darius shifted uncomfortably. She said she loved me, that she wanted me to be happy. She said more than that. She said she'd made sure you'd always be taken care of, that you'd always have a home. I turned to face them both. Did you ever wonder what she meant by that? The color drained from Tasha's face. Darius just looked confused. Mom, what are you getting at? I reached into my purse and pulled out a single document. A copy of the trust agreement Calvin had prepared for me that morning. I'm getting at the truth. Darius, the truth your grandmother made me promise to keep. Unless you ever forgot what family really means. Tasha lunged forward, trying to snatch the paper from my hands, but I held it out of her reach. What does it say? Darius asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at my son. This man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt something break free inside my chest. Not the crack from before. This was different. This was release. It says, my dear boy, that you don't own this house at all. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Darius stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language, while Tasha's face cycled through emotions faster than I could track them. Confusion, anger, fear, and finally, calculating fury. What do you mean I don't own the house? Darius's voice cracked like it had when he was 13. I smoothed the document in my hands, feeling the weight of 15 years of silence lifting from my shoulders. Sit down, both of you. It's time you learned the truth about your grandmother. Eunice. Tasha remained standing, her arms crossed defensively. This is ridiculous. Darius inherited this house when his father died. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows wrong. I moved to the couch. My couch. Though they'd reupholstered it in some hideous beige fabric, and waited for Darius to join me. He did. Reluctantly. Perching on the edge like he might need to run. Your grandmother was a very intelligent woman. Darius. Much more intelligent than your father ever gave her credit for. When she realized her son was going to leave me with nothing but debt and a child to raise, she made some arrangements. Darius frowned. What kind of arrangements? I opened the document and began to read. The Eunice May Holloway Family Trust. Established October 15th, 1987. Primary asset. The property located at 428 Willow Lane, valued at the time at $89,000. I looked up at Darius. That was 6 months before your father walked out on us. That's impossible, Tasha interjected. Darius's father left him this house. He told me so himself. Darius's father left him nothing, I said quietly. Because Darius's father never owned this house to begin with.
The color drained from Darius's face. But I've been paying the property taxes, the insurance. I have all the paperwork. You have paperwork showing you as the responsible party. Yes. But ownership, that's something entirely different. I turned to the second page of the document. According to the terms of this trust, the property belongs to Darius Holloway with one very important condition. Tasha moved closer, her pregnancy forgotten in her desperation to see what I was holding. What condition? I met my son's eyes, seeing his father in them for the first time in years. The same weak chin, the same tendency to avoid difficult truths.
The condition is that Darius must provide care and support for his mother, that's me, until my death or until I choose to relinquish my claim. If he fails to meet this obligation, ownership reverts to the trust administrator. Who's the trust administrator? Darius asked. Though I could see in his eyes that he already knew. I am. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tasha's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. This is fraud, she finally managed. You can't have been lying about this for 20 years. I haven't been lying about anything. I simply never felt the need to explain the legal details to Darius because he was fulfilling his obligations. He was a good son. He took care of me. I folded the document carefully until 3 days ago. Darius buried his face in his hands. Mom, I don't understand. Why didn't Grandma just leave me the house outright? The question I'd been dreading for 15 years. I looked around the room that Eunice had loved. So much, with its bay windows and hardwood floors, and the kitchen where she'd taught me to make her famous apple pie because she knew your father better than anyone else did. She knew what kind of man he was, and she was terrified you might turn out the same way. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but they were true. She wanted to make sure that if you ever inherited his selfishness, his ability to discard the people who loved him, there would be consequences. Tasha laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. This is insane. You're telling me that some dead woman is controlling our lives from beyond the grave. I'm telling you that a very wise woman anticipated this exact situation and planned accordingly. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Eunice made me promise to give Darius every chance to be the man she hoped he could become. For 15 years. I kept that promise, even when he stopped calling regularly. Even when he forgot my birthday 3 years running. Even when he brought home a woman who treated me like hired help. Darius looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, I never meant for things to go this far. Tasha was just stressed about the pregnancy. And stop. I held up my hand. Don't you dare blame this on her hormones or her stress. She told me to pack my things and disappear. She said she'd rather sleep in mud than share a roof with me. And you said nothing. I was trying to keep the peace. By sacrificing your mother, the accusation hit its mark. Darius flinched and looked away. Tasha, meanwhile, was pacing the room like a caged animal. There has to be something we can do, some way to contest this. Trusts can be broken, right? Some can, I agreed, but not this one. Eunice was very thorough. She had the best estate attorney in the state draw up the paperwork. Who was the attorney? Tasha demanded. Calvin Price. Darius's head snapped up. Uncle Calvin. But he's not really my uncle. He's Eunice's nephew. I finished. Her sister's boy. A very successful lawyer who specializes in estate planning and family trusts. He's also the one who's been managing the trust for the past 15 years. Tasha grabbed Darius's arm. Call him. Call him right now and find out what we need to do to fix this. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. By all means. Call Calvin. His number is in the phone book. I walked to the front door, then turned back. But before you do, you might want to ask yourself a question. What question? Darius asked miserably. Whether you think your grandmother was wrong about what kind of man you might become. I let myself out, leaving them to stew in the reality I just dropped on their heads. Outside, the evening air felt crisp and clean, like it does after a storm passes. My phone rang as I was unlocking my car. Calvin's number. I take it they called you, I said without preamble. Tasha Holloway just spent 10 minutes screaming at my secretary about fraud and elder abuse and false documentation. She wants to sue everyone from me to you to the probate court that approved the trust. And what did you tell her? I told her that I'd be happy to meet with them tomorrow at 10 a.m. to review the documentation. I also told her she might want to bring her own attorney. I smiled, imagining Tasha's reaction to that suggestion. How do you think they'll handle the news? Darius sounded scared. Tasha sounded desperate. In my experience, desperate people make poor decisions. Indeed, they do. I hung up and drove back to the hotel, feeling lighter than I had in months. In my room, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, Darius and Tasha would meet with Calvin and learn the full extent of Eunice's wisdom. They'd discover that the trust wasn't just about the house. It covered everything Eunice had left behind. The savings account with $30,000, the life insurance policy she'd never cashed in, the small investment portfolio she'd been quietly building for decades. All of it contingent on Darius fulfilling his obligations to me. All of it now in jeopardy because of his wife's cruelty and his own cowardice. I raised my glass in a silent toast to Eunice's portrait on my nightstand. You always were 3 steps ahead of everyone else, I whispered. I just hope I can be half as clever as you were. My phone buzzed with a text from Darius. Mom, can we talk? Please. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Tomorrow would bring its own conversations, and tonight, for the first time in 3 days, I was going to sleep peacefully. After all, I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The game, as Eunice would have said, was finally afoot. I arrived at Calvin's office 15 minutes early, wanting to watch Darius and Tasha's faces when they walked in and saw me sitting there, calm and composed, in the chair across from Calvin's desk. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, my best navy suit, the pearl necklace Eunice had given me for my 50th birthday, and my hair styled the way she'd always said made me look formidable. Today, I intended to be exactly that. They were 10 minutes late, and I could hear Tasha's voice echoing down the hallway before they even reached the office door. This is all some elaborate scam, Darius. Your mother and this lawyer are trying to steal what's rightfully ours. Calvin's secretary showed them in, and the look on Tasha's face when she saw me was worth 15 years of patience. Pure, undiluted shock, followed quickly by rage. What is she doing here? Tasha demanded,
pointing at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. "Mrs.
Holloway is the trust administrator," Calvin said calmly, gesturing for them to take the chairs across from his desk. "She has every right to be present for this discussion." Darius looked terrible. His hair was his clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd spent the night lying awake staring at the ceiling. Good. It was about time he lost some sleep over his choices. "Now then," Calvin continued, opening a thick file folder. "I understand you have some questions about the Eunice May Holloway Family Trust." Tasha leaned forward aggressively. "We want to know how to break it. This whole thing is obviously some kind of fraud designed to cheat Darius out of his inheritance." Calvin's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes that meant he was annoyed. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Darius never had an inheritance to be cheated out of." "That's impossible," Darius said quietly. "My father left me the house when he died." "Your father didn't own the house when he died," Calvin replied, pulling out a copy of the deed. "The property was transferred to the trust 6 months before he abandoned his family." Eunice was quite specific about the timing. Tasha snatched the deed from Calvin's hands and studied it like she might find some loophole hidden in the legal language. "This says the house was purchased by the trust for $89,000. Where did an old woman get that kind of money?" I almost smiled, even in her desperation. Tasha couldn't resist being condescending. "Eunice had been saving for years," I said calmly. "She worked as a bookkeeper for 3 different companies. She invested wisely, and she lived very modestly. She also saw what kind of man her son was becoming and decided to protect her grandson from him." Darius winced. "Mom, please don't talk about Dad like that." "Why not?" "Because it hurts your feelings. Your father walked out on us when you were 8 years old. Darius. He left us with nothing but debt and a pile of unpaid bills. If Eunice hadn't intervened, we would have lost everything." "She's lying," Tasha said desperately. "Darius, she's making this up to manipulate you." Calvin pulled out another document. Hospital records from October 1987. Eunice Holloway admitted for emergency surgery to remove a brain tumor. During her recovery, she became aware that her son was planning to leave his family. She immediately contacted my father's law firm to establish the trust. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Calvin's antique clock. Darius stared at the hospital records like they might change if he looked at them long enough. "Grandma had a brain tumor, a benign one, thankfully," I said softly. "But the surgery was risky, and she knew she might not survive. She wanted to make sure you were protected." Protected from what Darius's voice was barely a whisper. "From becoming your father," Calvin said bluntly. Eunice was very clear about her concerns. She'd watched her son charm his way through life, taking advantage of people who loved him, discarding them when they were no longer useful. She was terrified you might inherit those traits. Tasha's face was flushed with anger. "This is character assassination. You're both ganging up on Darius, trying to make him feel guilty about something his father did." I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman who'd spent months systematically destroying my life, and felt a cold clarity settle over me. "Tell me, Tasha, what exactly did Darius tell you about how he came to own the house?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "He inherited it from his father. It's been in the family for generations. And you never questioned that. Never wondered why there was no mortgage, no property tax bills in his name." Tasha faltered, glancing at Darius. The truth is, Darius has been living in that house rent-free for 15 years because I've been paying for everything. The taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, the utilities, everything. I pulled out a folder of my own. I have receipts going back to 1999. Calvin nodded approvingly. Which brings us to the current situation. According to the trust documents, Darius's right to live in the property is contingent on his fulfilling certain obligations. What obligations, Darius asked, though he sounded like he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. To provide care and support for his mother until her death, or until she chooses to relinquish her claim to need such care. Calvin read directly from the document. The trust defines care and support as ensuring her physical safety, emotional well-being, and inclusion in family decisions that affect her living situation. Tasha let out a bitter laugh. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You can't legally require someone to be nice to their mother. You can't legally require kindness. No, Calvin agreed. But you can legally require that a person not be ejected from their home by someone who has no legal right to do so. The implications hit Darius like a physical blow. His face went white and he gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles showed. Are you saying I'm going to lose the house? I'm saying that when your wife told your mother to pack her things and disappear, when she told her she'd rather sleep in mud than share a roof with her, and when you stood by and said nothing, you violated the terms of the trust. Tasha jumped to her feet. This is extortion. You're both trying to blackmail Darius into letting his mother control his life. We're not trying to do anything, I said quietly. We've already done it. Calvin pulled out the final document. The one I'd signed that morning before coming to his office, as of 9:00 a.m. today. Lydia Holloway has invoked her rights as trust administrator to reclaim the property. What does that mean? Darius whispered. It means, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt, that you have 30 days to vacate the premises. The explosion I expected from Tasha didn't come. Instead, she went very still, very quiet, in a way that reminded me of a snake coiling to strike. You vindictive old bitch, she said softly. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? You've been waiting for an excuse to destroy Darius's life. I've been waiting for Darius to show me that he remembered what family means. He failed. Darius finally found his voice. Mom, please. I know Tasha was wrong to say what she said, but you can't throw us out. She's pregnant. We have nowhere to go. You had somewhere to go. You had a home and a mother who loved you. And all the security Eunice worked so hard to provide. You chose to throw that away. I chose my wife, he said desperately. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt the last of my illusions about him crumble to dust. You were supposed to choose kindness, Darius. You were supposed to choose decency. You were supposed to remember that the woman who raised you deserved better than being thrown out like garbage. Calvin cleared his throat. There is one option. Tasha whirled around. What option? The trust documents include a provision for dispute resolution. If Darius can demonstrate that he's committed to fulfilling his obligations going forward, and if Marlene agrees to it, ownership can be restored. Hope flickered in Darius's eyes. What would I have to do? I smiled, feeling Eunice's wisdom guiding me one last time. That depends entirely on how much your marriage means to you. The silence in Calvin's office stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Darius looked from me to Tasha to Calvin, his face cycling through emotions I hadn't seen since he was a child, caught between telling the truth and protecting someone he loved. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. "What does my marriage have to do with the trust?" I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the weight of Eunice's pearl ring on my finger. She'd given it to me the day before she died, along with instructions I'd never thought I'd need to use. The trust includes a provision for what Eunice called toxic influences, I said quietly. She was very specific about protecting you from people who might manipulate you into abandoning your family obligations. Tasha's face went pale. "You can't be serious." Calvin opened another section of the file. Mrs. Eunice Holloway was quite thorough in her planning. She included provisions for situations where a spouse or romantic partner might pressure the beneficiary into violating the trust terms. "What kind of provisions?" Darius asked, though his voice suggested he was afraid to hear the answer. "Essentially, if Lydia can demonstrate that your wife has been actively working to undermine your relationship with her, the trust gives you a choice." Calvin looked directly at Darius. "Honor your obligations to your mother or forfeit your inheritance permanently." Tasha laughed, but there was hysteria in it. "This is insane. A dead woman can't control who Darius marries." "She's not controlling who he marries," I said calmly. "She's simply ensuring that his marriage doesn't destroy his family. There's a difference." Darius ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "Mom, what exactly are you asking me to do?" The question I'd been dreading and anticipating for 3 days. I looked at my son, really looked at him, trying to see past the weak chin he'd inherited from his father to the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them roses. "I'm asking you to choose, Darius. Really choose. Not just go along with whatever causes you the least immediate conflict. Choose between the woman who raised you and the woman who threw her out like garbage." Tasha stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "That's not fair. You're forcing him to choose between his mother and his pregnant wife. What kind of monster does that? The kind who spent 41 years putting her son's needs before her own, only to be told she'd rather sleep in mud than live under the same roof." I met her eyes steadily, the kind who has finally learned that sometimes love isn't enough if it's not reciprocated with basic human decency. Darius looked between us, and I could see him calculating, trying to find some middle ground that would let him keep both his inheritance and his wife, just like his father used to do. "There has to be some compromise," he said finally. "Some way to work this out that doesn't involve ultimatums. Your wife gave me an ultimatum 3 days ago," I reminded him. "She told me to pack my things and disappear. You said nothing. That was your compromise." Calvin cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should explain the exact terms of the provision. Mrs. Holloway. Would you like me to read from the document?" I nodded, steeling myself for what was coming. "In the event that the beneficiary's spouse or romantic partner demonstrates a pattern of hostility toward the trust administrator, including but not limited to verbal abuse, financial manipulation, or attempts to exclude the administrator from family decisions, the beneficiary must choose between maintaining the relationship and maintaining access to the trust assets." Tasha's face was white now, all her earlier bravado gone. Pattern of hostility. I was stressed about being pregnant and homeless. I said things I didn't mean. Did you or did you not sell my grandmother's dining room set without permission? Darius asked quietly. The question surprised me. I hadn't expected him to bring that up. Tasha's mouth opened and closed several times. I was trying to make space for the baby. I thought you'd inherited everything, so it was ours to do with as we pleased. Did you or did you not try to take out a loan using the house as collateral? This time, Tasha's silence spoke volumes. Darius turned to me, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of the man I'd hoped he'd become. Mom. Did you know when she was doing those things? Did you know about the trust? The question cut deeper than I'd expected. Yes. And you let me think I was responsible for the house. You let me pay property taxes and insurance on something I didn't even own. You were fulfilling your obligations. The trust covered those expenses. But Eunice wanted you to feel invested in maintaining the property. She wanted you to understand that nothing worthwhile comes without effort. Darius sat back in his chair looking stunned. So, all these years you've been testing me? All these years I've been hoping I'd never have to use the power Eunice gave me. I've been hoping you'd be the man she believed you could become. And now I looked at Tasha, who was standing by the window, her arms wrapped around her barely visible pregnancy, her face a mask of fury and fear. Then I looked back at my son. Now I know who you really are. The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, pressing back against his chair. That's not fair. Fair, I stood up, feeling 41 years of suppressed anger, finally breaking free. You want to talk about fair, Darius? Is it fair that I worked 3 jobs to put you through college while your father sent birthday cards twice a year? Is it fair that I gave up dating, gave up any chance of remarrying because you told me it would be weird to have a stepfather? Is it fair that I spent 15 years paying for a house you thought you owned? Never asking for gratitude or recognition? Just happy to have you in my life. My voice was rising and I could see Calvin reaching for the phone, probably worried I was about to have a heart attack. But I wasn't finished. Is it fair that I opened my home to your pregnant wife when she had nowhere else to go, and she repaid me by selling my belongings and telling me to disappear? Is it fair that you stood there and said nothing while she destroyed me? Darius was crying now, tears streaming down his face like a child's. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do. You just chose not to do it. Tasha finally turned away from the window. Fine. You want him to choose? Make him choose. But understand this, Lydia. If you force Darius to pick between us, and he picks you, this baby will never know its grandmother. I'll make sure of that. The threat was so casual, so cruel, that even Calvin looked shocked. Tasha, Darius said weakly, you don't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Your mother wants to play games with our lives. Fine. But she needs to understand that games have consequences. I looked at this woman who had invaded my home, destroyed my belongings, humiliated me in front of strangers, and was now threatening to weaponize my grandchild against me. I thought about Eunice's final words. If he ever forgets what family really means, you use whatever power you need to use. Calvin, I said quietly, please read the final provision of the trust. Calvin flipped to the last page of the document. In the event that the beneficiary's spouse demonstrates a willingness to use children as weapons against family members, the trust administrator has the authority to permanently revoke all benefits with no possibility of restoration. Tasha went very still. What does that mean? It means, I said, meeting her eyes with complete calm, that you just lost your husband, his inheritance, permanently. Darius looked up at me, his face stricken. Mom, please. She didn't mean it. She's just scared. She meant every word. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. And so did I. As I reached for the handle, Darius called out behind me. Mom, wait. Please tell me what I have to do to fix this. I turned back one last time, looking at my son and the woman who had destroyed our family. You can't fix this, Darius. It's already broken. The only question now is whether you're going to keep pretending it isn't. I left them there in Calvin's office. Tasha raging about lawsuits, and Darius crying like the lost little boy he'd never stop being. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean, full of possibility. For the first time in 3 days, I felt like I could breathe. 6 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen of my house, truly my house now, making Eunice's apple pie from memory. The recipe had never been written down. She'd taught it to me by feel, by instinct, the way mothers pass down everything that truly matters. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in months. No tension crackling through the air. No whispered arguments from the guest room. No sound of my belongings being moved around without permission. Just the peaceful quiet of a home where someone who belongs is finally allowed to exist without apology. I'd spent the past month putting everything back the way it should be. Eunice's portrait was restored to its place of honor above the mantel. My grandmother's dining room set, rescued from the consignment shop where Tasha had sold it, sat in the dining room where 3 generations of Holloway women had shared their meals and their stories. The guest room had been converted into something Eunice would have loved, a small library with comfortable reading chairs and shelves lined with books about gardening, cooking, and family history. The room where Tasha had planned to raise her child was now a sanctuary for the memories she'd tried so hard to erase. My phone rang as I was rolling out the pie crust. Darius's number? I'd been expecting this call for days. Hello, Darius? Mom. His voice was different somehow. Quieter. More careful. How are you? I'm well. How's the apartment? After losing access to the house, Darius and Tasha had been forced to find their own place. I'd heard through Mrs. Green that they'd rented a small 2-bedroom across town. The kind of place young couples start out in when they're building their lives together. The kind of place Darius would have been living all along if Eunice hadn't provided him with better, it's fine, small, but we're managing. He paused. Tasha had the baby last week, my hand still on the rolling pin. Despite everything that had happened, despite all the cruel words and broken trust, this was still my grandchild. Is everyone healthy? Yes. It's a boy. We named him Daniel after Dad. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd named their son after the man who'd abandoned his family while living in poverty because they'd driven away the woman who'd sacrificed everything to keep them together. I'm glad they're both well, I said, and meant it. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about what you said in Calvin's office. I waited, not making it easy for him. I'd spent too many years making things easy for Darius. I want to apologize, not just for what Tasha said, but for what I didn't say, for what I didn't do. His voice cracked slightly. You deserved better from me. Yes, I did. The simple acknowledgement seemed to surprise him. I think he'd expected me to minimize his failures, to rush to comfort him the way I always had. But those days were over. I know I can't undo what happened. I know I can't take back the things Tasha said or the way I let her treat you. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what kind of man I became, and I'm ashamed of it. I sat down the rolling pin and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Eunice had planted 40 years ago. The roses were blooming again, just like they did every spring, regardless of the chaos that had swirled around them. What happened to your marriage? Darius. A long silence. Then we're separated. Have been for 3 weeks now. I wasn't surprised. People like Tasha don't stick around when the benefits run out. I'm sorry. Are you... The question was sharper than I'd expected. I considered lying, offering the comforting platitudes that mothers are supposed to give. Instead, I chose honesty. I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm sorry you're raising a child alone. I'm sorry you learned such a hard lesson about the difference between love and manipulation. I paused. But I'm not sorry your marriage ended. If that's what you're asking, I understand why. Do you... She never loved me. She loved what she thought I could give her. When she found out about the trust, when she realized I'd never actually owned anything, she said some things I can't forgive. I could imagine Tasha's mask had slipped completely in Calvin's office that day. Once someone shows you who they really are, it's impossible to unsee it. What will you do now? I don't know. I'm working 2 jobs to pay for the apartment and child support. Tasha's living with her sister in Phoenix. She says she might let me have Daniel for Christmas if I can prove I'm financially stable. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away, using a child as leverage, making a father beg for time with his own son. It was exactly what she threatened to do to me, now turned against Darius himself. I'm thinking about going back to school, he continued. Maybe getting that engineering degree I always talked about. It would take a few years, but Daniel will need college money eventually. And I can't provide that working in retail for the first time in months. I heard something in my son's voice that reminded me of the boy I'd raised. Determination, responsibility, the willingness to work for something better instead of expecting it to be handed to him. That sounds like a good plan. Mom? His voice was small, uncertain. Do you think I could see you sometime? I know I don't have any right to ask, but I miss you. And I think Daniel should know his grandmother. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 41 years of motherhood settling on my shoulders. The instinct to forgive, to rush in and fix everything was still there. It probably always would be. But Eunice's wisdom whispered in my ear. Love him enough to let him earn his way back. I think that could be arranged, I said carefully. But there would be conditions. What kind of conditions? You come alone. At least for the first few visits. You don't bring anyone who hasn't proven they can treat me with basic respect.
And you understand that this house is my sanctuary. Now, if you can't honor that, you're not welcome here. I understand. And Mom, yes, thank you for not giving up on me completely. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking around at the home Eunice had fought so hard to preserve. She'd understood something that had taken me years to learn. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is consequences. Darius had lost his inheritance, his marriage, and his easy life, but in losing those things, he'd found something more valuable. The chance to become the man his grandmother had always hoped he could be. 3 days later, he knocked on my door at exactly 2 hosera, the time we'd agreed on. He looked older, thinner, worn down by the reality of supporting himself for the first time in his adult life. But his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. Hi, Mom. Hello, Darius. He held out a small gift bag. I brought something for you. Inside was a framed photo of baby Daniel along with a card that read, "For the grandmother who deserves to watch him grow up, love, Darius and Daniel." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them away. This was a beginning, not an ending. "He's beautiful," I said, studying the photo. The baby had Darius's nose and what looked like my eyes. Eunice's eyes. He is... And he's going to know about his great-grandmother, Eunice, and about the woman who raised his father, even when his father didn't deserve it. We sat in the living room, talking carefully at first, then more easily as the afternoon wore on. Darius told me about his job at the hardware store, about the night classes he'd enrolled in, about the small apartment where he was learning to cook for himself and do his own laundry. "It's harder than I thought it would be," he admitted. "Living on my own. I never realized how much you did for me all those years. You weren't supposed to realize it. That was the point." As the sun set, painting the living room in warm golden light, Darius stood to leave. "Mom, I want you to know something. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep trying to be the son you deserved." I walked him to the door, feeling something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness. That would take time. But hope. The fragile, precious hope that Eunice had planted 15 years ago was finally beginning to bloom. "See you next week," he asked. "Same time." I agreed. After he left, I returned to the kitchen and finished Eunice's apple pie. As it baked, filling the house with the scent of cinnamon and memory, I sat in my favorite chair and opened the book I'd been reading, a novel about second chances and the courage it takes to start over. Outside, Mrs. Green was working in her garden and she waved when she saw me through the window. Tomorrow we were having coffee together and she was bringing her photo albums to show me pictures of her new grandson. For the first time in months, I had plans that had nothing to do with being anyone's mother or caretaker or financial support. I had plans that were just for me. The pie timer chimed and I rose to take Eunice's recipe out of the oven. Perfect golden brown, just the way she'd taught me to make it. Some traditions I thought are worth preserving, and some people are worth waiting for, even when they lose their way. But most importantly, some women are worth fighting for, even when that woman is yourself.
I cut myself a slice of pie and poured a cup of tea, then settled back into my chair with my book. Outside, the sun was setting over the garden Eunice had loved, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I was home. Finally, truly home. And it was enough, now. I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.